The twin suns of Kepler 442b were setting behind the crystalline towers of Veltar City when the first explosions lit up the sky. He had been tending to his meditation garden, his 6 delicate arms carefully pruning the luminous flowers that his people had cultivated for thousands of years. The Zephyrians were a peaceful race, their bodies graceful and translucent, evolved on a world where violence was unknown and harmony with nature was their greatest achievement. The sound that shattered the evening calm was unlike anything Veltar had ever heard. It was deep and terrible, like the planet itself was screaming. He looked up to see streaks of fire cutting across the darkening sky, and his heart sank as he realized what was happening. The Korthik had found them. Veltar ran through the crystal corridors of his diplomatic complex, his lightweight body moving with desperate speed. As the official ambassador of the Galactic Peaceful Coalition, he had access to the most advanced communication systems in known space. Behind him, he could hear the sounds of his city dying. The Korthik weapons were unlike anything the Coalition had faced before. They did not simply destroy buildings or ships. They seemed to erase them from existence itself, leaving nothing but empty space, where vibrant life had been moments before. The communication chamber was a marvel of Zephyrian technology, its walls lined with crystals that could transmit messages across the galaxy in seconds. Veltar's hands shook as he activated the emergency protocols, his mind racing through the list of possible allies who might answer their call for help. The Coalition fleets were already scattered or destroyed. The Andromedans had fled to their deep space colonies. The peaceful Keplerians had surrendered without a fight, their entire species now enslaved or extinct. The Korthik were not like other species that the galaxy had known. They were massive beings, each one standing nearly 4 meters tall, with thick armor-like skin and weapons grafted directly into their bodies. They came from a world of constant warfare, where only the strongest survived, and they viewed all other species as either slaves or obstacles to be eliminated. For 300 years, they had been expanding their empire, consuming entire star systems, and leaving nothing but dead worlds in their wake. As Veltar worked frantically at his communication console, the building shook from another massive explosion. Through the transparent walls of his chamber, he could see Korthak dropships landing in the city center, disgorging their terrible warriors into the streets. The Zephyrians were running in panic, their delicate forms no match for the brutal efficiency of their attackers. The ambassador pulled up the Coalition database, searching for any civilization that might have the strength to stand against the Korthik dominion. Most of the entries showed species that were either extinct, enslaved, or had already fled to the far reaches of space. But there was one entry that made him pause, one that even the Korthik spoke of in hushed tones when they thought no one was. Listening.Sol-3. Earth. The Deathworld. The file was sparse, containing only basic information about a species that had somehow managed to survive on one of the most hostile planets in the galaxy. The humans, as they called themselves, came from a world where everything seemed designed to kill them. Their planet's gravity was crushing by galactic standards. Their atmosphere was a toxic mix of gases that would poison most civilized species. Their weather systems were violent and unpredictable, capable of generating storms that could level cities. Yet somehow, these humans had not only survived, but thrived. What made the file truly remarkable were the few reports from traders and explorers who had made contact with Earth. The humans were described as aggressive and territorial, but also capable of surprising acts of compassion. They were technologically advanced, but in ways that seemed focused on survival rather than comfort. Their ships were built like fortresses, designed to operate in conditions that would destroy most vessels. Their soldiers trained in environments that would kill other species within minutes. Veltar had never paid much attention to these reports before. The humans were distant and rarely involved themselves in galactic affairs. They seemed content to remain in their small corner of space, exploring nearby systems and building their defenses. But now, as his world burned around him, they represented his people's only hope. The building shook again, more violently this time. Veltar could hear the Korthik warriors in the lower levels, their heavy footsteps echoing through the crystal corridors as they searched for survivors. He had perhaps minutes before they reached his chamber. His fingers flew over the controls as he composed his message. It would have to be broadcast on all frequencies, sent to every corner of human space, in the desperate hope that someone would hear it and respond. He included everything he could about the Korthik threat, their numbers, their weapons, their tactics. He transmitted the coordinates of every coalition world under attack, every refugee fleet trying to escape, every last stronghold were peaceful. Species were making their final stands, but it was the closing of his message that took the most thought. How do you ask a species of warriors to risk everything for people they had never met? How do you appeal to beings who came from a world of violence to save those who had never known war? In the end, Veltar spoke from his heart. He told them about his people, about their love of beauty and peace, about the children who would never grow up to tend the crystal gardens. He told them about the dozens of other species facing extinction, entire civilizations that would be lost forever if the Korthik were not stopped. He told them that the galaxy was calling, and that only Earth's children had the strength to answer. As he finished the transmission and sent it racing toward Sol System, Veltar heard the Korthik breaking down the doors of his complex. He sealed the communication chamber and began destroying the equipment, ensuring that the invaders could not use it to track the human response. Through the crystal walls, he could see the massive forms of Korthik warriors searching the ruins of his city, their weapons still glowing from the destruction they had caused. The last thing Veltar saw before the chamber filled with toxic gas was the status light on his transmitter, blinking steadily as it confirmed that his message had been sent. Somewhere in the cold depths of space, his desperate plea was racing toward Earth at faster than light speed, carrying with it the hopes of every peaceful species in the galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison was reviewing supply reports in his office aboard Luna Station when the priority alert chimed. The grizzled veteran had been expecting another routine patrol assignment, or perhaps a pirate incursion in the outer colonies. What he found instead was a message that would change everything. Transmission was weak and distorted from its long journey across space, but the desperation in the alien voice came through clearly. Morrison listened in growing anger as the Sephirian ambassador described the systematic genocide being carried out by the Korthik Dominion. He watched the attached tactical data, seeing the massive scale of the enemy fleet and the speed with which they were destroying entire civilizations. Morrison's aide, Lieutenant Amy Foster, entered the office just as the message finished playing. She was young and idealistic, having joined the Earth Defense Network because she believed in protecting innocent life wherever it might be found. The look on her captain's face told her that something terrible had happened. Morrison explained the situation quickly, his voice tight with controlled fury. As he spoke, Amy pulled up the galactic maps, tracking the path of destruction that the Korthik had carved across space. Dozens of star systems had gone dark in the past few months, their populations either dead or enslaved. When Morrison finished, Amy was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke the words that were in both their minds. "Sir, the Joint Chiefs are going to say it's not our fight. These aliens never helped us when we needed it. They never even made contact until now." Morrison stood and walked to the observation window, looking out at Earth hanging in space below them. His homeworld was blue and white and beautiful, but he knew what lay beneath that serene surface. Earth was a crucible that had forged humanity into something unique in the galaxy. They were survivors, fighters, protectors of the innocent. He thought about his own childhood, growing up in the ruins of Detroit, After the resource wars, he remembered the stories his grandfather had told him about the old days, when humans fought each other instead of standing together against the darkness. Those days were gone now. Humanity had learned hard lessons about the cost of allowing evil to flourish unchecked. Morrison turned back to his aide, his decision already made. Maybe they never helped us, Amy, but that's exactly why we have to help them. Because we're not them. We're better than that. He crushed the digital tablet containing the supply reports, his cybernetic hand reducing it to fragments. Prep the fleet, every ship we can spare. Send word to Mars Command and the Jupiter Defense Grid. Tell them the Deathworld is going to war. The emergency session of the United Earth Council was unlike anything Admiral Lisa Chun had witnessed in her 30 years of military service. The massive chamber beneath New Geneva was filled with representatives from every human colony and Hausu, military district in known space. Holographic displays showed the carnage spreading across the galaxy as the Korthek Dominion continued their systematic extermination of peaceful species. Chun stood at her designated position among the military. Advisors, watching the politicians debate while entire civilizations burned in real time. The debate had been going on for 6 hours now, with various council members arguing about jurisdiction, resources, and the wisdom of involving humanity in what they called an alien conflict. Some representatives worried about provoking the Korthik into attacking human space. Others questioned whether Earth had any obligation to species that had never acknowledged human existence before this crisis. Admiral Chun had heard enough. She stepped forward to the speaker's podium, her uniform bearing the scars of a dozen campaigns against pirates and raiders in the outer colonies. Her presence commanded immediate attention from everyone in the chamber. She began her address by displaying the tactical data that had arrived with the Zephyrian transmission. The Korthik fleet was massive, but their tactics were crude and relied on overwhelming force rather than strategy. They had grown accustomed to fighting species that prioritized individual survival over collective victory. They expected their enemies to surrender when faced with superior numbers. Chun paused at the center of her presentation, letting the images of burning worlds fill the holographic displays around the chamber. Then she spoke the words that would echo through human history. These Korthik have made one critical error. They assume all species are as fragile as the ones they have been slaughtering. They have never faced humanity. The Admiral went on to explain what every human military officer knew, but few civilians understood. Earth was not just another world in the galaxy. It was a crucible that had forged its children into something unique. While other species evolved on gentle worlds with stable climates and abundant resources, humans had survived ice ages, volcanic winters, asteroid impacts, and countless other catastrophes that would have wiped out softer civilizations. Human technology reflected this harsh reality. Where other species built ships optimized for comfort and efficiency, humans built vessels designed to survive in the black hellscape of space itself. Human weapons were designed to function in the crushing gravity wells of gas giants or the radiation-soaked environs of stellar coronas. Human soldiers trained in conditions that would literally dissolve most alien PHY, SIOL, GI, as Chun spoke. The political debate in the chamber gradually died away. The representatives began to understand that this was not just about helping aliens in need. This was about what humanity represented in a galaxy full of peaceful species that had never learned to defend themselves. This was about standing up to bullies who thought might made right. The vote was unanimous. Within hours, mobilization orders were flashing across human space from the inner colonies of Sol System to the frontier worlds beyond Proxima Centauri. Shipyards that had been building exploration vessels and cargo haulers switched immediately to military production. Reservists were called up from civilian jobs. Retired veterans returned to active duty. The entire human war machine began to turn with terrifying efficiency. Meanwhile, in the massive shipyards orbiting Mars, Chief Engineer Carlos Rodriguez was already 3 steps ahead of the official orders. He had been monitoring the emergency, broadcasts from the coalition worlds, and he knew what was coming. Rodriguez had served in the Titan Rebellion 20 years earlier, where he had learned that successful military operations depended on logistics as much as courage. The Martian facilities were the crown jewel of human military engineering, built inside hollowed-out asteroids and powered by fusion reactors. They could produce everything from single-seat fighters to massive dreadnoughts. But Rodriguez was not just concerned with building new ships. He was focused on modifying the existing fleet for a type of warfare that humans had never fought before. The human fleet was already unlike anything else in the galaxy. Where other species favored sleek designs that minimized mass and maximized speed, human engineers built their ships like flying fortresses. The hulls were constructed from alloys that could withstand solar flares and cosmic radiation. The armor was designed to absorb and redistribute impact energy from weapons or debris. The internal compartments were sealed and redundant, allowing ships to continue fighting even after suffering massive damage. Rodriguez stood in the central command center of the primary shipyard, surrounded by holographic displays showing the status of every vessel in the human fleet. His team was working around the clock to retrofit ships for long-range operations in unknown space. They were adding extra armor plating to vulnerable sections, upgrading weapon systems with ammunition types designed to penetrate alien technologies, and installing additional life support systems for extended campaigns. The flagship of the human fleet was a testament to their engineering philosophy. The UE's Vengeance was not the largest ship ever built, but it was certainly the most heavily armed and armored. Its hull was forged from materials harvested from the cores of dead stars. Its weapon systems included everything from conventional kinetic projectiles to exotic energy weapons that could crack the crust of a planet. Its crew quarters were designed to function in zero-gravity, crushing acceleration, or the electromagnetic chaos of a stellar storm. Captain Rachel Kim had been chosen to command the flagship, not because of her political connections or her academic achievements, but because she had survived more desperate situations than any other officer in the fleet. She was a veteran of the Proxima Wars, where human colonists had fought off an invasion by the Silicon Confederacy. She had commanded a destroyer during the Vega incident, where a single human task force had held off an entire pirate armada for 6 days until reinforcements arrived. Kim stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, reviewing the tactical data that intelligence had compiled about the Korthic forces. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Dan Parker, was running simulations based on the enemy's known capabilities and tactics. The results were sobering. The Korthic had numerical superiority in every category except one. They had never fought humans. Before Parker pulled up a holographic display showing the estimated Korthic battle formations. The enemy favored massive dreadnoughts supported by swarms of smaller vessels. Their tactics were straightforward and brutal, designed to overwhelm enemy positions through sheer firepower. They typically opened engagements at long range, using their superior numbers to destroy enemy formations before they could close to effective combat distance. Kim studied the data with the calculating mind of a predator. The Korthic had been successful because they had never faced an enemy that adapted quickly to changing conditions. Human military doctrine was based on flexibility and initiative. Where other species might retreat when faced with superior numbers, humans had a disturbing tendency to charge straight into the teeth of enemy formations, accepting casualties that would break other militaries in exchange for tactical advantages. The captain turned to her communications officer and ordered him to establish contact with the other fleet commanders. Within minutes, She was connected to admirals and captains throughout human space, all of them making final preparations for the largest military operation in human history. Admiral Jack Bennett commanded the Second Fleet from his flagship, the UES Retribution. He was a veteran of the asteroid mining conflicts, where small groups of miners had held off corporate security forces using nothing but modified industrial equipment and pure determination. Bennett understood that victory often went to the side that was willing to take risks that others considered insane. Commander Steve Walsh led the fast attack group aboard the UE Defiance. His ships were smaller and faster than the main battle fleet, designed for hit-and-run tactics and reconnaissance missions. Walsh had earned his reputation in the outer colonies, where pirates and raiders learned to fear the arrival of his squadron. His crews were specialists in asymmetric warfare, capable of using terrain and misdirection to defeat larger forces. As the human fleet prepared to depart, word of their mission spread throughout Earth's colonies. On Luna, factory workers volunteered for double shifts to produce additional ammunition and supplies. On Europa, the deep space monitoring stations began tracking every signal from Coalition space, providing intelligence updates to the departing fleet. On Titan, the military academies graduated their senior classes early, sending fresh officers to fill gaps in the expedition force. The departure of the human fleet was witnessed by millions across the solar system. Ship after ship emerged from planetary orbit, their engines casting brilliant streams of light across the darkness of space. They formed up in precise formations, each vessel taking its designated position in the largest armada humanity had ever assembled. Captain Kim stood on the bridge of the Vengeance as the fleet prepared to enter hyperspace. Around her, the crew moved with quiet efficiency, each person focused on their assigned tasks. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system like a storm front moving across a peaceful sky. Captain Rachel Kim stood on the bridge of the UE's Vengeance, watching as her tactical displays populated with contact signatures. What she saw made her stomach turn with rage that she had not felt since her first combat mission 20 years earlier. The Korthik fleet was arranged in a perfect formation around the dying world of Kepler 442b, their massive dreadnoughts, methodically bombarding the surface, while smaller vessels hunted down refugee ships trying to escape the system. Kim could see the thermal signatures of burning cities on the planet below, and her communications officer was picking up desperate transmissions from survivors trapped in underground shelters. But what truly ignited the fury of every human in the fleet was the sight of Korthak vessels using fleeing civilian transports for target practice. The alien warships would allow refugee ships to almost reach the edge of the system before destroying them with casual precision, their crews apparently finding entertainment in the desperation of their victims. Admiral Jack Bennett's voice crackled over the fleet communications channel from his flagship, the UES Retribution. His words were calm and professional, but every human officer recognized the deadly intent beneath his controlled tone. Bennett had seen enough warfare to know that some enemies could only be dealt with through overwhelming force. The Admiral opened communications on all frequencies, broadcasting to every ship in the system. His message was simple and direct, delivered in the universal trade language that most spacefaring species understood. Korthik vessels, this is Admiral Bennett of the United Earth Fleet. You will cease your attacks on civilian targets immediately and withdraw from this system. This is your only warning. The response from the Korthik came within seconds. The largest dreadnought in their formation, a massive vessel nearly 2 kilometers long, turned its weapons toward the human fleet. Its commander, Warlord Thakmer, had built his reputation by crushing over 40 different species in the past decade. He had never encountered a civilization that dared to issue ultimatums to the Korthik Dominion. Thakmer's reply was broadcast on the same frequency that Bennett had used his voice filled with the arrogant contempt that had served him well against the peaceful species he typically faced. He dismissed the humans as just another weak civilization that would break the moment they faced real violence. He boasted about the worlds he had conquered and the species he had enslaved. He described in graphic detail what would happen to Earth once his forces finished their current campaign. That was the moment when the Korthik made their fatal mistake. They had spent so long fighting species that valued individual survival above all else that they had forgotten what happened when predators encountered other predators. They had never faced an enemy that became more dangerous when threatened. The human fleet's response was immediate and devastating. Bennett gave the order that every captain had been waiting for since they entered the system. All ships, weapons free. Show them what happens when someone threatens our home. The UE's vengeance opened fire first, its main batteries unleashing a barrage that lit up space like a newborn star. The Korthik had expected human weapons to be similar to the energy beams and plasma cannons used by other galactic civilizations. Instead, they found themselves facing kinetic projectiles accelerated to significant fractions of light speed, exotic particle weapons that ignored conventional shielding, and nuclear warheads designed to function in the radioactive hell of close stellar orbit. The Korthik flagship Thakmer commanded took the first volley directly on its forward armor plating. The alien vessel had been designed to withstand the relatively gentle weapons used by peaceful species. It was not prepared for the focused fury of human military engineering. The first impacts cracked its armor like an eggshell. The follow-up barrage punched through to the interior compartments, setting off secondary explosions that split the massive dreadnought in half. Commander Steve Walsh watched from the bridge of the UE's Defiance as his fast attack group swept through the Korthik formation like sharks moving through a school of fish. His ships were smaller and more maneuverable than the main battle units, designed for exactly this type of close-quarters combat. They dove between the enemy dreadnoughts, their weapons targeting engine compartments and command sections with surgical precision. The Korthik tried to respond using the tactics that had served them well against other species. They attempted to surround individual human ships and destroy them through concentrated fire from multiple vessels. What they discovered was that human ships were designed to survive exactly this type of punishment. The U's Defiance took direct hits from 3 different dreadnoughts simultaneously, weapons impacts that should have vaporized any reasonable spacecraft. Instead, the human destroyer absorbed the damage, redistributed the energy through its armor plating, and continued fighting. Walsh's weapons officer, Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos, had been trained on Earth's moon, with a low gravity and harsh conditions had taught her to make every shot count. She watched her targeting displays with the patience of a sniper, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When a Korthik heavy cruiser exposed its reactor housing while maneuvering to avoid another human ship, Santos put 3 armor-piercing rounds directly into the alien vessel's power core. The explosion that followed lit up the entire battlefield. The Korthik cruiser simply ceased to exist, its destruction taking 2 smaller escort vessels with it. The psychological impact on the remaining alien forces was immediate and devastating. They had never seen one of their heavy warships destroyed so quickly and efficiently. Captain Kim coordinated the battle from her position on the Vengeance, directing her fleet with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. She had studied the tactical reports from the destroyed coalition fleets, learning from their mistakes and identifying weaknesses in Korthik formations. Where previous enemies had tried to match the aliens ship for ship, Kim used her vessel's superior mobility and firepower to attack from multiple directions simultaneously. The battle raged for 6 hours, but the outcome was never truly in doubt. The Korthik had numerical superiority, but they were fighting an enemy unlike anything they had encountered before. Human ships moved through their formations like ghosts, appearing suddenly to deliver devastating attacks before vanishing into the black void of space. Human crews fought with a coordination and determination that the aliens found incomprehensible. Lieutenant Dan Parker coordinated the tactical displays on the Vengeance Bridge, tracking the movements of both fleets in real time. He watched as Korthic vessels that had dominated battlefields across the galaxy were systematically hunted down and destroyed by human forces less than half their size. The aliens kept trying to retreat to defensive positions, but human ships pursued them relentlessly, giving them no opportunity to regroup or call for reinforcements. The turning point came when Admiral Bennett led a direct assault on the Korthic command ship. The UES Retribution charged straight through the center of the alien formation, its armor absorbing tremendous punishment, while its weapons carved a path of destruction through the enemy fleet. Bennett's ship took hits that would have crippled most vessels, but the human engineers had built their flagship to fight in conditions that would destroy lesser craft. The Retribution's assault opened a gap in the Korthic formation that the rest of the human fleet exploited with ruthless efficiency. Commander Walsh's fast attack group swept through the breach, targeting command vessels and communication arrays. Captain Kim brought the main battle line to bear on the heaviest enemy units, her dreadnoughts trading volleys with alien warships in brutal exchanges that lit up the darkness of space. As the battle entered its final phase, the surviving Korthic forces found themselves scattered and demoralized. They had lost over 2/3 of their fleet to an enemy that refused to follow the rules of engagement they understood. Where they expected their opponents to retreat when damaged, humans used battle damage as motivation for even more aggressive attacks. Where they expected mercy for defeated enemies, humans offered only the choice between surrender and destruction. Warlord Fagmer, commanding the battle from a secondary flagship after the destruction of his primary vessel, watched his forces collapse with growing horror. He had built his career on the assumption that all species were fundamentally similar in their weakness and fear of death. The humans had proven that assumption catastrophically wrong. In desperation, Fagmer ordered his remaining ships to target the refugee vessels that were still trying to escape the system. If he could not defeat the human fleet directly, perhaps he could force them to choose between pursuing his forces and protecting the civilians they had come to save. The Korthic commander had made his final mistake. The moment his weapons turned toward defenseless refugees, every human in the fleet felt something primal and terrible awaken in their minds. They were no longer fighting a military engagement. They were protecting innocent life against monsters who targeted the helpless for sport. What followed was not a battle, but an execution. Word of the human victory at Kepler spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. In hidden bases and refugee camps throughout Coalition space, alien survivors listened to the impossible reports with growing hope. The Korthic Dominion, which had seemed unstoppable just days before, had suffered their first major defeat in over a century. More importantly, the humans were not stopping with a single battle. Captain Tony Mitchell commanded the UES Nemesis, a hunter-killer vessel specifically designed for independent operations behind enemy lines. His ship was sleek and predatory, built for speed and stealth rather than the massive firepower of the main battle fleet. Mitchell had volunteered for this assignment because he understood something that many of his fellow officers did not. The Korthic had been allowed to terrorize peaceful species for too long, and the only way to stop them permanently was to hunt them down wherever they tried to hide. The Nemesis emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Vega system, where intelligence. Reports indicated that Korthic raiders were attacking refugee convoys trying to reach Coalition safe zones. Mitchell's crew had been tracking these particular aliens for over a week, following the trail of destruction they left behind as they preyed on defenseless civilian ships. The tactical display on the Nemesis Bridge showed 3 Korthik cruisers surrounding a convoy of 12 refugee vessels. The alien warships were taking their time, destroying one transport after another while the survivors watched helplessly. It was a pattern that the Korthik had perfected over decades of warfare against species that could not fight back effectively. Mitchell studied the enemy formation with the calculating mind of a predator. The Korthik cruisers were spread out to prevent the refugee ships from escaping, but this also meant they could not provide mutual support if attacked. Their commanders were overconfident, expecting no serious resistance from anyone foolish enough to challenge them. Lieutenant Amy Foster, who had transferred from Luna Station specifically to serve under Mitchell, monitored the communications. From the refugee convoy, the desperate pleas for help from the civilian ships made her blood boil with righteous anger. These were families and children, scientists and artists, all of them fleeing worlds that the Korthik had already destroyed. Mitchell gave the order that his crew had been waiting for. The Nemesis dropped its stealth systems and accelerated toward the nearest Korthik cruiser at maximum thrust. The human ship moved like nothing the aliens had ever encountered, closing the distance between them in seconds rather than the minutes they expected. The first Korthik cruiser died before its crew even realized they were under attack. Mitchell's weapons officer put 2 nuclear-tipped torpedoes directly into the alien vessel's engine compartment, the explosions tearing the ship apart from the inside. The Nemesis swept past the expanding debris field, already turning toward its next target. The second Korthik cruiser tried to flee, its captain finally understanding that he was facing something far more dangerous than the usual coalition patrol. Ships, but the Nemesis had been designed specifically for pursuit operations. It caught the fleeing alien vessel at the edge of the asteroid belt, where the Korthak commander thought the rocky debris would provide cover from human weapons. Mitchell had trained his crew for exactly this type of environment. They used the asteroids as stepping stones, bouncing their ship from rock to rock while their weapons picked off the Korthik vessel piece by piece. The alien cruiser's armor, designed to withstand the energy weapons used by peaceful species, offered little protection against human kinetic projectiles that could punch through solid stone. The third Korthik cruiser managed to escape to hyperspace, but not before Mitchell's communications officer intercepted its emergency transmission. The fleeing aliens were reporting their encounter to their superiors, describing the human ship as some kind of demon that could appear and disappear at will. This was exactly what Mitchell had hoped for. Fear was a weapon that could be more effective than any gun or missile. The Korthik had built their empire on terror, using their reputation for overwhelming violence to break enemy morale before battles even began. Now they were learning what it felt like to be afraid. The refugee convoy that the Nemesis had saved contained representatives from 6 different species that the Korthik had been systematically exterminating. As Mitchell's crew helped transfer wounded civilians to better-equipped medical ships, he listened to their stories with growing determination. These aliens described worlds where entire populations had been enslaved or killed for sport, where Korthik commanders competed to see who could destroy cities most efficiently. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Colonel Jennifer Lee was preparing for a different type of mission. Intelligence reports had located a Korthak prison planet in the Centauri Nebula, where thousands of alien prisoners were being held in conditions that violated every civilized standard of treatment. The facility was heavily defended and considered impregnable by conventional assault forces. Lee commanded the Terran Marine Corps' most elite unit, soldiers who had been trained specifically for operations in hostile environments. Her troops were equipped with powered armor that could function in vacuum, toxic atmospheres, or crushing gravitational fields. They were armed with weapons designed to penetrate any known defensive system, and they had been trained to fight in conditions that would kill most other species within minutes. The prison planet was protected by gravity field generators that created crushing forces around the facility. The Korthik had assumed these fields would make any assault impossible, since most galactic species could barely function under twice their normal gravity. They had not considered the possibility of facing attackers who had evolved under Earth's punishing gravitational field. Lee's assault force approached the prison planet in specially modified drop pods, small vehicles designed to penetrate enemy defenses through brute force rather than stealth. The pods punched through the gravity fields like bullets through paper, their occupants protected by acceleration compensation systems that could handle forces that would liquefy most alien physiologies. The Korthik garrison detected the incoming attack, but their response was too slow and too confused. They had never faced an enemy that would voluntarily subject themselves to crushing gravitational forces just to reach their targets. Their defensive systems were designed to stop ships and conventional assault craft, not individual soldiers in powered armor moving at hypersonic speeds. Lee's Marines hit the prison facility like a meteor shower, their drop pods smashing through defensive barriers and landing directly in the central courtyard. The colonel emerged from her pod already firing, her squad automatic weapon cutting down Korthik guards who had barely begun to react to the assault. The battle for the prison complex lasted exactly 12 minutes. The Korthik defenders were tough and experienced, but they had never fought an enemy like the Terran Marines. Lee's soldiers moved through the facility's corridors like death itself, their powered armor shrugging off weapons fire that would have stopped conventional troops. The Marines fought with the precision and coordination that the Korthik found terrifying. Where other species might have retreated when faced with superior numbers, the humans advanced steadily through the facility, clearing room after room with methodical efficiency. Their weapons seemed designed specifically to penetrate Korthik armor, and their tactics suggested they had studied alien defensive procedures extensively. The liberation of the prison planet sent shockwaves throughout Korthik space. Thousands of alien prisoners were freed, many of them technical specialists and military officers who provided valuable intelligence about enemy operations. More importantly, the attack demonstrated that no Korthik facility was truly safe from human retaliation. Warlord Thigmar, now commanding the scattered remnants of his forces from a hidden base in the Outer Rim, watched the reports of human activities with growing desperation. The species he had dismissed as insignificant was systematically dismantling his empire piece by piece. Every day brought new reports of Korthik ships destroyed, bases captured, and slave worlds liberated. The warlord's intelligence chief, Iscard, veteran of dozens of campaigns, provided updates that grew more disturbing with each passing day. The humans were not fighting like any enemy the Korthik had previously encountered. They did not seek territory or resources. They did not demand tribute or negotiate for favorable surrender terms. They simply hunted down Korthik forces wherever they could be found and destroyed them without mercy. What made the human campaign truly terrifying was its relentless efficiency. Where other species might have paused to consolidate their gains or negotiate with remaining enemy forces, the humans pressed their attacks continuously. They seemed to have an unlimited supply of ships and soldiers, all of them dedicated to the complete elimination of the Korthik threat. Captain Mitchell's hunter-killer group had grown into a full squadron, with additional ships joining his force. As word of their success spread throughout the human fleet, they roamed through Korthik space like wolves, appearing suddenly to destroy isolated enemy units before vanishing back into the void. The war that had begun with the systematic genocide of peaceful species ended 3 months later with the complete collapse of the Korthik dominion. What had started as a desperate plea for help from dying civilizations had become the most thorough military campaign in galactic history. The humans had not simply defeated their enemies. They had hunted them across space with methodical precision that left no doubt about the outcome. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the ruins of the Korthik capital city on their homeworld of Draxon. Prime, the massive structures that had once housed the Empire's ruling council, were now twisted metal and shattered stone, their destruction a testament to the price of choosing genocide as a policy. Around him, the surviving members of the Korthik High Command knelt in surrender, their once proud forms reduced to trembling shadows of their former selves. The final battle for the Korthik homeworld had lasted only 6 hours. The aliens had gathered their remaining forces for what they hoped would be a decisive confrontation, mustering over 200 ships and their most experienced commanders. They had chosen to make their stand in orbit of their own world, believing that desperation would give them the strength to defeat the human fleet. They could not have been more wrong. The human task force that arrived at Draxon Prime was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 3 months of continuous warfare had transformed the Earth Defense Fleet into a precision instrument of destruction. Every ship had been battle-tested. Every crew had learned the hard lessons of combat, and every commander understood exactly what they were fighting for. Captain Rachel Kim had led the assault from the bridge of the UE's Vengeance, her flagship now scarred by dozens of battles, but more dangerous than ever. The veteran crew around her moved with the fluid efficiency of professionals who had fought together through hell and emerged stronger for the experience. They had seen the Korthik prison camps and slave worlds, and they knew that mercy for such enemies was betrayal of their victims. The orbital battle had been a masterpiece of human tactical doctrine, where the Korthik had expected their enemies to match them ship for ship in a conventional engagement. The humans had divided their forces into multiple attack groups that struck from different vectors simultaneously. Admiral Bennett's heavy units had engaged the alien battle line directly, drawing their attention, while Captain Mitchell's hunter-killer squadrons swept through their formation like sharks among smaller fish. The Korthik had tried to retreat to the surface of their homeworld when the battle turned against them, hoping that their planetary defense systems would provide enough protection to continue the fight. Instead, they discovered that human weapons had been specifically designed to penetrate such defenses. Colonel Lee's Marines had already secured the main defense installations, their powered armor allowing them to operate in the toxic atmosphere that the Korthik homeworld's industrial pollution had created. Morrison looked down at the alien commanders who had once terrorized half the galaxy. Warlord Thakmer was among them, the scarred veteran who had boasted about the species he had enslaved and the worlds he had destroyed. Now he cowered before a human admiral, his massive frame shaking with fear as he contemplated the justice that awaited him. The human commander spoke through his translator, his words carrying the weight of absolute authority. You could have lived in peace. The galaxy is vast enough for all species to find their place in it. Instead, you chose genocide. You targeted the innocent and defenseless. You turned warfare into entertainment and suffering into sport. Now you face the consequences of those choices. Morrison gestured to the Marine guards who surrounded the surrender ceremony. These soldiers had seen the evidence of Korthik cruelty firsthand. They had liberated the prison camps and freed the slaves. They had heard the testimony of survivors and witnessed the aftermath of systematic extermination. There was no mercy in their eyes, only the cold satisfaction of justice finally being served. The terms of surrender were simple and absolute. The Korthik Dominion would be dissolved immediately. All surviving military personnel would be relocated to a designated prison world where they would spend the remainder of their lives contemplating their crimes. The civilian population would be placed under the protection of the reformed Galactic Coalition, with human oversight, ensuring that they could never again threaten peaceful species. As the formal surrender proceedings concluded, Morrison received reports from across the former Korthik territories. The liberation was proceeding smoothly, with coalition forces supported by human advisors taking control of every major installation and population center. A vast network of slave worlds and prison camps that had sustained the alien empire was being systematically dismantled. Ambassador Veltar, who had survived the destruction of his homeworld by hiding in the deep shelters beneath his diplomatic complex, stood beside Morrison as they watched the Korthic leaders being led away to imprisonment. The Zephyrian diplomat had been among the first aliens to witness human military capabilities, and he still struggled to comprehend the transformation that had occurred in such a short time. The galaxy that had seemed doomed just months before was now experiencing a renaissance of hope and cooperation. Species that had fled to the far reaches of space were returning to rebuild their shattered worlds. The Galactic Peaceful Coalition was being reformed under new leadership, with humanity taking a place of honor among the member species. But perhaps more importantly, the nature of galactic civilization itself was changing. The peaceful species that had been helpless against the Korthok were learning from their human protectors. They were developing new technologies, creating defensive alliances, and most importantly, accepting that sometimes peace must be defended. With strength, Captain Kim stood on the observation deck of the Vengeance, watching as human ships established patrol routes throughout the former Korthok territories. These vessels would remain in the region for years to come, ensuring that no other predatory species could fill the power vacuum left by the Empire's collapse. It was a commitment that would require substantial resources and personnel, but one that humanity had accepted without hesitation. Lieutenant Dan Parker approached his captain with the latest intelligence reports. Long-range sensors had detected movement in the unexplored regions beyond Coalition space, suggesting that other hostile forces might be preparing to test the galaxy's defenses. The victory over the Korthik had been complete, but the universe was vast and full of potential threats. Kim read the reports with the calm professionalism that had carried her through dozens of battles. The data suggested the presence of another aggressive species, one that called itself the hegemony and appeared to be expanding toward Coalition territory. Their technology seemed more advanced than the Korthik, and their military doctrine appeared to be based on absorption rather than simple destruction. The captain turned to her communications officer and ordered him to transmit the intelligence data to Fleet Command on Earth. Within hours, the information would be analyzed by the best strategic minds in human space, and plans would be developed to deal with this new potential threat. But Kim was not worried about the future. The galaxy had learned an important lesson during the Korthik War, one that would serve it well in the challenges to come. When predators threatened the innocent, when bullies targeted the defenseless, when evil sought to triumph over good, the Deathworld of Sol 3 would answer the call. The memorial service for the human dead was held simultaneously on every world and ship in human space. Over 12,000 men and women had given their lives to protect species they had never met, to defend civilizations they had never visited, to uphold principles that transcended the boundaries of race and planet. Admiral Morrison delivered the main address from the steps of the rebuilt Coalition Council building on New Geneva. His words were broadcast across the galaxy, heard by billions of beings who owed their freedom to human sacrifice. He spoke of duty and honor, of the responsibility that came with strength, and of the eternal vigilance required to protect the innocent from those who would harm them. The human military did not demobilize after the victory. Instead, it evolved into something new, the Terran Intervention Fleet, a rapid response force dedicated to protecting peaceful species from those who would exploit their gentleness. Ships and personnel were stationed throughout Coalition space, ready to respond to any threat with overwhelming force and absolute determination. The reformed Galactic Coalition established new protocols for dealing with aggressive species. The old policy of appeasement and negotiation was replaced with a doctrine based on human military philosophy. Peace through strength, backed by the willingness to use that strength when necessary. The galaxy's peaceful species finally understood that their survival depended not on the goodwill of predators, but on their ability to defend themselves and their allies. In the years that followed, the Korthik became a cautionary tale told throughout civilized space. Their survivors, confined to their prison world, served as living reminders of what happened to those who chose genocide over coexistence. Their warning to other would-be conquerors was simple and direct: never anger the humans. For they do not forget, they do not forgive, and they never stop coming.